Welcome back. This is the Intel on ENCA. We continue our conversation around issues to do with electricity. You've seen politicians are making all sorts of grand promises, right? That they will fix the electricity crisis in Soweto. They will deal with the issue of non-payment and the infrastructure will be upgraded. It's not new, is it? Are you hearing anything you've not heard before? Weigh in on the conversation. I'll reflect on your inputs towards the end of this show. And I promise, I will do it. I did promise you that I will keep my promise. I don't want to be like a politician and not keep my promises. Mr. Xivangu, let me bring this back to you then. How much of a factor is this issue of non-payment? Because, you know, people who don't live in Gauteng and specifically who don't live in Soweto, I've heard people, for instance, from the Eastern Cape saying it must be nice being someone from Soweto, a Sowetan. We all have to pay for electricity, but they don't seem to have to pay. I'm sure that, Cleopatra, you will have heard that being said from time to time. But Mr. Xivangu, from your side, how much of a factor is non-payment?
Yeah, it is a huge factor and it is a concern for us. If we look on the total number of customers that are not paying for electricity in Soweto, we're looking at around 570,000 people out of a total base of almost 970,000 customers who are not paying for electricity. So if you look at our losses, we're sitting at over 70% of our customers not paying for electricity that they're utilizing. And we cannot be able to sustain the operations if customers are not paying for the electricity that they're using.
Sure. Cleopatra, from your side, what is your understanding of the culture of non-payment? Some say, and I don't know if it's simplistic or not, but you can tell me, some suggest that this has its roots in the boycotts of the 80s, that we never really, you know, people of Soweto never really left that point in history. Even though now you are at a point where you have a democratic government, it has just simply continued. What's your understanding of the outlines of the culture of non-payment?
Okay, first of all, the reason why there is so much high rate of non-paying, it's because one, Eskom himself, they are not even transparent in the way they are treating their customers. I can assure you that most of the people that are affected with load shedding, power cut off, some of them, they have receipts that they are buying electricity. And the minute they lift up their phone and make a call, Eskom is giving them attitude. So the best way is to stick on what is written on the Freedom Charter to say free basic service for all, which electricity is one of the free basic service. And lastly, Eskom is accessing our tax money, and they didn't even show decency of informing us as the end users while borrowing money from World Bank. So who must pay on their behalf?
When you say, if I stick with you, Cleopatra, for a moment, when you say free basic services, are you talking about a threshold of electricity usage being a free allowance as we have as a policy currently, or are you saying completely free, which some will say, many will say, is simply not sustainable?
Okay, I will say completely free because I made an example earlier to say when I recharge to buy electricity using 100 Rand, on the machine, it will say 67 Rand 70. I have a proof of that. All these years, where are these other balances going to? So now I'm no longer prepared to pay or to buy Eskom because they are ripping us off without any notification and without any political, not even political, doing a simple popular education in educating their customers on what is happening. They are not transparent. So why must we bother ourselves to be transparent to them and pay? Who are we paying for? Why must we pay? Because we are not even accessing electricity as much as we want. I pay electricity, I buy electricity, but the minute there is load shedding, I'm also affected. The minute there is power cut off, I'm also affected. So why must we pay?
I'll bring it back to you a bit later, Mr. Xivangu, to respond to what Cleopatra has said. Mr. Booi, from the city of Cape Town, the customer attitude towards paying for the services received, how much of a factor is it for you, aside from the areas that remain in the dark, such as, you know, parts of Delft, which I will ask you specific questions about perhaps in the next round then. But for now, address the issue of customer attitude towards paying for services received.
Well, from our side, I think our customers predominantly, they are paying for our services because of how we treat them. And I'm so shocked on how Eskom is treating the other parts of the world and it's of the country. Because part of what we have done as a city of Cape Town is to make sure that we do education to our customers. Hence, I'm saying, when the DA took over, we made sure that even in a situation where there's informality, people have electricity boxes where they're able to pay for their electricity and they're able to contribute towards what we pay for at Eskom, because we buy our electricity from Eskom. But what is of concern to me, and which is what is demonstrated here, is a gross mismanagement of the service by Eskom and also perhaps by the city of Johannesburg to its customers or its citizens. And there are areas in which, as a city, where we are still, where we're still having some challenges, but it's very minimal. And we are going to those areas to make sure that we encourage those citizens to make sure that they come to the fore, and we assist them to be able to get the electricity boxes so that they can be able to buy the electricity. Hence, we have advocated for a prepaid kind of a system so that people can be able to manage how much they utilize, and they can be able to monitor it themselves. So and regulate that particular exercise themselves. So we are hoping that there will be a great improvement. But from our side, it's very minimal, and also on that minimal point, we're trying to manage it at our level best. But there are areas that are serviced by Eskom within the city of Cape Town. There are areas that are managed by the city of Cape Town, but the messaging is the same. Because as I've indicated initially, where we have challenges at the moment, where you would see some areas that are not electrified, it's those people who have taken land forcefully, and we have not been in a position to reticulate those areas, like in near Delft that you mentioned. I mean, that was meant to be an area that is not human for human habilitation. So, but we are dealing with those issues on a daily basis.
Yes, I will ask you what the content of dealing with those issues entails in just a moment. Clyde Mallinson, what are the solutions specifically around the issue of billing? The prepaid electricity meters are hugely unpopular. Well, popular with segments of society where you'll have people such as President Cyril Ramaphosa. He says he's on prepaid, and his wife, the First Lady, is able to keep track of how much electricity they are using and is finding that they are saving. You will have people who say that, but you will have people who say the billing around prepaid electricity simply does not make sense. People saying that we pay this much, but the units that we receive in return are simply not what we should be receiving, let alone the whole issue of automatic cut-off without any other mechanisms to go and plead your case when you run out of units. Is prepaid really the solution?
Thanks, Tudor. I'm going to turn the discussion around slightly. In terms of what your meter reflects, it's probably reflecting how many kilowatt hours you've purchased with 100 Rand. So at current electricity prices on a block inclining tariff, if you spent 100 Rand, you'd probably get about 67 kilowatt hours. 10 years ago, if you spent 100 Rand, you might have got 400 kilowatt hours, and that's a reflection of the increase in the price of electricity. So what shows on the meter is not how many rands you've bought, but how many kilowatt hours you've purchased. But what I would like to see to turn this whole situation around is what would happen if the 350,000 households in Soweto each chipped in 100,000 rand via a bond on their properties from the banking sector in South Africa and constructed a 3,500 megawatt solar plant in a series of different solar plants, potentially at one or two of Eskom's power stations. So they would then enable a just transition at the power stations, and they would actually then own that solar plant in terms of getting dividends from it. And the dividends that they would receive would be sufficient to pay off the bonds that they had raised in their homes. So over a period of 20 years, they would earn about 150,000 rand over what they would have to repay on their bonds. So that's the kind of thinking I think we need to have. And I think if every person in Soweto had to have a prepaid, but knew that they were buying electricity from their own plant, that they were receiving dividends from at the same time, it would change the whole thought process. So my solution would be allow the people to own the new fleet, the new generation assets, and to then take advantage of being not only owning those assets, but being able to buy cheaper, greener electricity from those assets at the same time. At the same time as assisting people in Mpumalanga to transition from the coal mining background that we have or history into a new, clean, green energy future. So that would be the kind of solution I would look at. And the numbers stack up fantastically in Soweto, but likewise in Alexandra. And in fact, I believe that all of the areas in South Africa, we should start looking at mechanisms of people who are in the perhaps lower income brackets being the ones who have first rights to owning the new fleet that we have to build. And that way, I think we actually get around a number of problems at the same time.
All right, those are interesting solutions that you're putting forward there, Mr. Clyde Mallinson, an independent energy analyst, and Patricia Shezi joining me from the Soweto Crisis Committee, one of the activists in the area, actually. Malusi Booi joining me from Cape Town, and Mashangu Xivangu from Eskom. We continue this conversation in the next few minutes. I give Mashangu Xivangu from Eskom an opportunity to respond to some of the issues that have been raised in the last few minutes, specifically around prepaid, the issues of billing, those issues coming up in just a moment, but also conversations about Eskom's infrastructure itself, the state of that infrastructure, and what has led to this new thing that is called load reduction.